Welcome to Everyday Cooking with Ann. I love Mexican food, and coming from Arizona and California, there's a lot of good Mexican food restaurants out there, but once you learn how to make your own Mexican food at home, it's so wonderful. And not to mention the fact, if you are a prepper, if you buy, like I'm buying, a lot of pinto beans, you could live on pinto beans if it's homemade and you make your own refried beans. And that's what I'm going to teach you how to make today. It's great in the homemade tortillas that I'm going to teach you how to make later, and your own homemade salsa. It's so delicious just to make it yourself, and I've come up with some really great recipes that will work for you for having your own Mexican food at home, to make at home. So we're going to teach you today how to make your own homemade refried beans that are going to taste as authentic as anything that you could get anywhere. And what I've done is I've doubled my recipe because I'm making quite a few beans today, so I'm doubling the recipe. And so I have a little bit more than 2 pounds of beans in my pot. Now, I've already soaked these all night long the day before. So they are now ready to go in the oven. And how you can make these so that they don't split apart and that they turn out soft and creamy and delicious is that we're going to be cooking them at a low temperature in my oven, in my nice big ceramic pot. So what I have is 2 pounds of beans that have, like I said, have already been soaked overnight, sorted through to make sure there's no pieces of rocks or debris in there. And I've put in 8 cups of water. So you can have this recipe for you at home if you want to just make a small amount of beans and keep them available. I know that, like my grandchildren, they eat like burritos all day long, and so they need a lot of beans whenever we make them, so that's why we double it. Okay, so I put 8 cups of water and about 2 pounds of beans in this pot, ready to go. And I'm not going to worry about the size of my onions and garlic because we're going to be pulverizing these with a emulsifier later on when we're finished. So all I'm going to do is add a lot of this is 1 whole onion. It's a large onion. The recipe calls for half an onion, but we're doubling the recipe. And I have about 7 or 8 cloves of garlic, and I'm just keeping them whole. Now, I am not going to salt the beans right now because when you salt the beans at the beginning, it makes them tough. So you're going to add the seasonings and everything else that makes these beans amazing after they've been cooking for several hours. So I'm going to put these on for maybe 1.5 to 2 hours. I'm going to check them to see if they're really soft and ready to go. I'm going to be showing you step 2 of making our homemade refried beans. I've had these in my oven in my nice thick ceramic pot probably for 2.5 hours. We went out visiting a lot of people, taking some of my other food that I made today for a Sunday afternoon, and we came back thinking, oh, I hope the beans are not overdone. They're actually perfect. They're perfectly creamy. You can see there's we have our onions that are all nicely mixed in with the beans, and lots of garlic, full garlic here. And now we're going to add the rest of the ingredients, our immersion blender, to create just perfectly wonderful refried beans. Okay, we have doubled this recipe. So let me tell you what I'm going to be putting in as the doubled recipe. We have usually just a 4-ounce can of green chilies, but we're putting a whole 7-ounce because we doubled the recipe. So we're going to put all of those green chilies in there. And then we're going to be putting in, this is going to be the fat portion. Actually, let me cut this in half a little bit so that it'll melt in here quickly. I'm going to turn it back on the oven a little bit. So in the past, I've used just butter in here, but what makes it really creamy is a 1/2 cup of olive oil. So you can use all olive oil or half butter, half olive oil, which I'm putting butter in because it gives a really great flavor as well. Okay, and then I have a recipe here that has been like what I use in everything Mexican. And I'm going to print that in the recipe below with the beans. You'll use this for the salsas that I teach you to make and anything else Mexican I teach you to make. This homemade seasoning of Mexican seasonings is to die for. It really is, and you're going to get the secret. I learned how to make these beans as well as from an authentic Mexican chef. She taught us how to do it, and ever since then, everybody wants my recipe for it. So anyway, just thought I'd tell you that. I'll share that recipe for you too. So I'm going to be going ahead and putting a tablespoon of this seasoning in here as well. And since I'm doubling it, and now beans require a lot of salt, so it calls for a tablespoon. So I'm a little leery about putting 2 tablespoons in, so I'm gonna just put the first tablespoon in and see if I need to add more, and I probably will. I just not sure exactly if I want to do that or not. So I'm mixing this in right now, heating this up a little bit so the butter melts before I turn my immersion blender on. Okay, with the immersion blender, I'm going to go ahead and put this in here, and this is going to pretty much puree all the beans and all the ingredients. We've let our black beans cool for quite a while, and they thickened up just perfectly nicely. So don't worry about the fact that it seemed very soupy at the end of our video here. You can be sure that these are the best beans ever that you're ever going to eat. One of the main things that are so great about these beans is that, number one, they're economical. You can buy big bags of black beans and pinto beans to put in your food storage for if you need it later in your life. But if you want to be able to make these beans, they are economical, they're delicious, and they have no preservatives, and vegans will love them as well. So this is an all-around recipe that you want to have on your to-do list. Hope you enjoy these beans, and see you next time.